Vera was immensely proud of her son Ryan. Tall, handsome, and well-educated, he was a programmer at a respectable oil company. Only 2 years had passed since he graduated from university, and he was already a department head. He had earned it all himself. His professional success caught the attention of the right people, and he was promoted. When Vera heard the news, she wept with joy. Everything had turned out just as she'd dreamed, maybe even better. Ryan was earning a good salary, and he'd bought a new car straight from the showroom. Vera had given him a car for his graduation, spending nearly all her savings, but for her own child, no sacrifice was too great. The flat, however, Ryan had bought himself. It was mortgaged. But it was spacious, new, and right in the city centre. He was doing it up bit by bit, living with his mother for the time being, a fact that pleased Vera very much. Of course, she knew Ryan was a grown man who would soon be completely independent, get married, and start his own life. But for now, she cherished his presence. She was happy to cook his favorite meals and iron his shirts in the evenings when he returned from work. Just like when he was a schoolboy, she would ask him about his day. Lately, though, he hadn't seemed to be in a hurry to get home. He definitely had a girlfriend, but for some reason he didn't want to introduce her. Vera assumed the relationship wasn't serious and that he wasn't making any long-term plans with this woman. He probably just didn't want to worry his mother unnecessarily. Vera understood this and accepted it. A man should have a few experiences before he meets the one. Of course, Vera often thought about her future daughter-in-law. She dreamed of a well-bred, successful woman from a wealthy family. Ryan deserved the best, as he himself was a gift. Vera knew she had played a significant role in helping her son become the man he was, and she was proud of it. She had done everything right. Vera gave birth to Ryan late in life, when she was in her early 40s. Before that, things just hadn't worked out. As a young woman, she had dedicated herself entirely to her studies, determined not to return to her village, her chores, and the endless demands of her younger siblings. She saw her university education in economics as a chance to live the life she'd always dreamed of. Her hard work paid off. The dean himself, seeing her potential, helped her get a job as a bookkeeper at a local company. "It's all in your hands now, my dear," he'd smiled. "Don't let me down." Vera didn't. She was ready to work day and night and quickly became so indispensable that the chief accountant would consult with her before making any major decisions. Vera was happy. The respectable salary allowed her to stay in the city, rent her own place, and not go back to the village. As time went on, Vera remained passionate about her work, constantly taking courses and reading trade literature to improve her skills. She didn't think much about her personal life, even though she was regularly propositioned by attractive men. However, she knew it was too early to start a relationship, let alone a family. First, she needed to become financially independent. This was an unusual mindset for a woman of her time. All her peers dreamed of a good marriage, but Vera was focused on her career. Her efforts paid off. 10 years after university, she had saved up enough to buy her own flat without any help from her parents, who wouldn't have been able to support her financially even if they had wanted to. Vera felt a sense of immense pride and happiness the first time she slept in her own home. By her early 30s, she was the chief accountant at a big company with a stable, high income. It was time to think about a family. Vera finally began to consider her suitors. She had had a few brief, casual romances before, a welcome distraction from her serious work. But now she wanted something different. A serious relationship, marriage, and children. At her age, childless women were considered spinsters. There were plenty of suitable, smart, and successful men around Vera, but the trouble was most of them were already married. However, as the saying goes, fate will find you wherever you are. One night, Vera was working late on a report and took a taxi home. It was late, and the driver was a handsome, talkative young man who looked about the same age as her. But it turned out he was 7 years younger. Victor told jokes that made her laugh, complimented her, and made her feel comfortable enough to open up about her life. Suddenly, Vera realized she wished the journey would never end. It was so easy and pleasant to talk to the charming driver. He didn't seem to be in a hurry either, taking detours to prolong the ride. In the end, they exchanged numbers. Victor called her the very next day, and things took off. Vera had never felt so desired and loved. Victor seemed to fill her with his energy and love for life. He soon moved into her flat and didn't hide his delight. Living with his parents and his sister, who had recently divorced and returned home with her 3 children, had been cramped. Vera now felt as though she was flying home after work, as her flat was no longer empty and cold. Victor was always there, smiling, friendly, and very caring. With the most basic ingredients, he could make a meal that rivaled a restaurant's best dishes. He also kept the rooms tidy and was always concerned about whether Vera was hungry. No one had ever cared for her like this. It all ended very badly. It took Vera a few years to realize that Victor was simply using her. If not for a chance encounter, she might have ignored the warning signs for much longer. Victor didn't stay a taxi driver for long after he moved in with Vera. At first, he complained that it was a hard and dangerous job with all sorts of clients. Then his taxi company closed down. Vera was almost relieved. She wanted Victor to find a calmer job. She was scared for him, especially when he worked nights, and she was jealous too. After all, he had met her at work. What if he met a beautiful young client and fell in love with her? Vera couldn't bear the thought. Her feelings for Victor were too strong. Victor seemed to look for work, browsing job ads, making calls and going to interviews, but nothing came of it. "Don't worry," Vera would reassure him. "My salary is more than enough. You can take your time." And Victor took his time. He'd occasionally pick up odd jobs, often leaving at night, sometimes for a few days at a time. After these trips, he would seem happy, and Vera thought she understood why. She herself liked being financially independent and assumed he enjoyed the chance to earn money. She was wrong. One day, Vera was on a business trip to a small town for an audit. Victor was away on one of his jobs and had said he wouldn't be back for at least 2 days. After the audit, her colleagues took her out to dinner, and there, at a neighboring table, she witnessed a distressing scene. At first, it looked sweet. A young man gazed adoringly at the girl sitting opposite him, stroking her hand and brushing her hair. He occasionally kissed her, a truly beautiful, loving couple. The problem was, the man was Victor. He didn't notice her, for which Vera was grateful. First, she didn't want to cause a scene in front of her colleagues, and second, she needed time to collect her thoughts before confronting him and dealing with the betrayal. Alone in her hotel room, Vera buried her face in a pillow and sobbed. It was a deep, nauseating, gut-wrenching pain. She had truly loved Victor, made plans for their future, and even thought of names for their children. Now, all those dreams were shattered. The scene she'd witnessed clarified everything. She knew it wasn't normal to fully support a grown man who wasn't in a hurry to find work. A few months of temporary crisis was one thing, but Victor had been living off her for a couple of years, and these so-called jobs were just a cover for him to meet other women. He must have lied to them, pretending to be single and successful, taking them to restaurants with her money. Vera pulled herself together and showed Victor the door. He first tried to justify himself with flimsy excuses, then swore his love and begged for forgiveness. But when he saw that Vera was resolute, Victor said what was really on his mind. "What did you expect? You're old. I'm young. I'm attracted to young, beautiful women who are easy to talk to. You're cold, bossy, unpleasant, and fat. Who would want you?" He slammed the door shut on his way out. Vera considered his words. Was it true? Was she really that horrible? Perhaps that was why she'd had so much trouble with men while her friends were already taking their kids to school. Vera took the breakup hard. Victor's behavior had soured her on all men, and she no longer wanted to get married. But she didn't give up on her dream of becoming a mother. From then on, she had short-term relationships with only one goal in mind, to have a baby. But a child never came. She couldn't see a doctor about it. At the time, it was considered immoral to plan a child outside of marriage. Vera decided she was infertile and came to terms with it. No husband, no child. At least she had her job, her only solace. Then, just after her 40th birthday, Vera met her fate. Andrew was the divorced CEO of a partner company. From their very first meeting, he was clearly interested in the chief accountant, complimenting her, smiling warmly, and eventually asking her out. This was how it all began. Andrew was a stark contrast to Victor. He took Vera to expensive restaurants, gave her lavish gifts, and helped her with her work. She didn't have the same intense feelings for him as she had for Victor. No passion, no infatuation. But in Andrew's presence, she felt desired and loved. She felt calm and secure. So when he proposed, Vera happily accepted. They moved into Andrew's flat, and Vera rented out her own. She had been honest with her future husband, telling him she couldn't have children. She was certain, as all her attempts had failed. But Andrew didn't mind. He was already a father. His son and daughter were in their final year of university, and he was in regular contact with them and helped them out. Vera was astonished when she found out she was pregnant. It felt as if a wave of warmth and happiness washed over her. The dream she thought would never come true was now a reality. Andrew was delighted too. He was certain it was a boy and suggested naming him Ryan, after his grandfather. As it turned out, Andrew was right. They had a son. But Andrew never saw his son. Vera's happiness was short-lived. Andrew died of a sudden stroke at the age of 45. Vera took a long time to recover from the loss. It was the knowledge that a baby was growing inside her that helped her through the grief. She knew she had to be strong for him. Vera moved back into her own flat. Andrew's grown children immediately claimed his. Vera chose not to take any of the inheritance, believing it was the right thing to do. It was Ryan who pulled her out of her depression. Born prematurely, tiny, sickly, and fussy, he required all of his mother's attention and strength. Vera had to spend a great deal of money on doctors. The premature baby had many health issues, and some of the diagnoses, including cerebral palsy, were frightening. But Vera never gave up. She found the best specialists, read up on new medical advances, and got her son into the best rehabilitation centers. All her hard work paid off. By the time he started school, Ryan was not only completely healthy, but also intellectually advanced for his age. Medals for swimming competitions hung above his bed. A small piano sat in the corner of his room, and he was already performing classical pieces. His bookshelves were overflowing with colorful children's books, and he loved to read. Vera had instilled this interest in him, and it had worked. In school, Ryan earned top grades and continued to excel in sports. In his teens, he became interested in programming. Vera supported this useful hobby, buying him a powerful computer and all sorts of gadgets. She didn't understand the details, but she was a proud sponsor of her dedicated son. Her efforts were not in vain. Soon, Ryan began winning programming competitions. Vera's heart swelled with happiness every time he brought home another certificate. She knew then that her son would go far and achieve great things. This was all thanks to Vera. Without a moment of doubt or rest, she had dedicated herself to him, first to his health, then to his development and upbringing. She took him to clubs and classes, traveled with him to competitions, and juggled it all with a demanding job. It was hard for Vera to manage without a partner. Sometimes, she would look on with a hint of sadness as fathers walked with their children or took them to school. Life would have been easier and more pleasant with Andrew. But it wasn't to be. So she tried her hardest to be a father and a mother to her son. She wanted him to feel as little of his father's absence as possible. There were many benefits to being a late mother. Young mums were often impatient with their children or ignored them, prioritizing their careers, social lives, and beauty appointments. Vera knew that a child was a priceless gift, and she didn't regret a minute of the time and energy she poured into her son's development. The result exceeded all her expectations. He got into university on his own with brilliant exam results and was a straight A student until his fourth year. His fourth year. Vera shuddered at the memory. It was as if a switch had flipped in Ryan. He started hanging out with a new crowd. Vera was happy at first. Ryan had dedicated all his time to his studies, just as she had. But he was a young man and needed to have fun, socialize with people his own age, and fall in love. When else would he have the chance? She didn't even object to his late-night outings, even though her heart would sink with fear and her imagination would paint frightening pictures. But Vera hid her feelings. She understood that this was part of growing up. Things escalated to the point where Ryan was out clubbing almost every night, coming home at dawn, stumbling to his bed and collapsing, fully clothed. All while Vera, who had been worried all night, got ready for work. It was a difficult period. His grades plummeted. The dean of the faculty called Vera and warned her that if things didn't change, they would have to expel him. Vera was horrified. She tried to reason with her son, but he only snapped and swore at her. She didn't recognize him. He had always been so polite, so considerate, and now he was aggressive, insulting her and using foul language. It was as if he was a different person. Vera tried to rein him in by cutting off his money. She only gave him enough for his bus fare to university. But the clubbing continued. Soon, she realized that her son had not been going out with his own money. A few of her gold chains and rings were missing from her jewelry box. Then she found out he had failed his exams and had been expelled. This was a step too far. Vera confronted him. He called her names, slammed the door, and disappeared for a few weeks. Vera was out of her mind with worry. She even reported him missing to the police, but they didn't take her report seriously. "He's a young man. He'll be back after he's had his fun," a detective reassured her. Vera argued with the officer, accusing him of being indifferent, and threatened to file a complaint, but the man turned out to be right. Ryan returned home, barely able to walk. He was pale and disheveled, looking like a street vagabond. Vera knew her son had a drinking problem. He would stumble, talk nonsense, and behave aggressively. It was all the influence of the bad crowd he had fallen in with. Vera was horrified to find herself afraid of her own son. But just as she had done years ago when she had to nurse a frail, premature baby, she pulled herself together and resolved to fight for her son. This time, it was harder. Ryan refused to see a doctor or cut ties with his friends. "Can't you see they're dragging you down with them?" his mother pleaded. "You were the top student in your year, a talented programmer. All that hard work, and you're willing to throw your life away? Soon there will be no turning back. But with them, I can be myself, not the perfect boy you want me to be," Ryan retorted. "I'm finally free of your pressure. Just accept it, and it will be easier." Vera argued, cried, begged, and tried to talk to her son, but nothing worked. It was painful and frightening to see what her son was becoming. She was also overwhelmed by a sense of guilt. She had failed as a mother. It was her mistake. She was a terrible mother. About a year later, things just went back to normal. It happened after one of Ryan's longer absences. Vera had almost given up, but then a miracle happened. Ryan changed again. At first, he went to clubs less often. Then he stopped going altogether. Vera no longer saw her son in that frightening, strange state. He was readmitted to university, thanks to his previous good grades, and the tutors were happy to have such a talented student back. He even started freelancing again, creating websites for companies. Vera decided that her son had gone through a difficult adolescent phase in his 4th year. Usually it happened earlier, in the teenage years, but for her son, it had happened then. After the crisis, he had suddenly matured and straightened himself out, and now everything would be fine. She believed her efforts had played a part. Her lectures had, perhaps, sunk in, and in the end, her son had made the right choice. For a while, Vera was still anxious, watching her son carefully, afraid that history would repeat itself. But Ryan's behavior was impeccable. One day, seeing the worry in his mother's eyes, he asked for her forgiveness. "I know how much pain I caused you, and I'm ashamed." He bowed his head, his whole posture showing sincere regret. "I called you names, I stole your things and sold them just to get money for fun. You've done so much for me, and that's how I treated you." No, that's all in the past," Vera was quick to reassure him. "The important thing is that you've realized your mistakes and changed. It was an important life lesson for you. Now everything will be fine." "Yes, everything will be fine, I promise. And I'll definitely pay you back for the jewelry I took and more." Ryan kept his promise. He graduated with a first-class degree and got a good job at a prestigious company. By then, Vera had retired and had some connections, but she didn't need to use them. Ryan got the job on his own. With his first paycheck, he bought his mother new jewelry, even more expensive than the ones he had taken from her box. He awkwardly handed her a couple of velvet boxes. Vera said nothing, just hugged him tightly. She didn't want any tension between them. They were the two closest people in the world. Time passed. Ryan worked, bought a flat, and started renovating it. From time to time, he traveled with his friends. He had got his mother into traveling too, often buying her interesting tours around the country, and sometimes he would even go with her. It seemed there were no secrets between mother and son. They talked about everything. And yet, Vera knew Ryan had a girlfriend he wasn't talking about. She tried to ask questions, but he was evasive. One day, he just told her that everything would happen in its own time. Vera let it go. After all, he was a grown man and had a right to his privacy. She assumed the relationship wasn't very serious if he still hadn't introduced her to his mother. There was another forbidden topic. What had happened to him during that difficult period? He never talked about what his friends were like, what he did when he disappeared for days, and most importantly, how he had managed to pull himself out of that swamp. Whenever Vera tried to bring it up, Ryan became withdrawn. She eventually stopped asking. The most important thing was that everything was fine now. Vera sat in her armchair embroidering. Lately, she had taken up needlework. It was very calming, and the beautiful pictures she created filled her with joy. The walls of her living room were already covered in them. Before, Vera had no time for such pleasant hobbies. Her son and her work took up all her energy. She truly couldn't understand how anyone could waste time on embroidery when there was so much to do. She had the TV on in the background, showing some mundane daytime soap. It wasn't that she was a fan of them, but sometimes she just wanted to watch something light and easy. Old age, she thought, was probably catching up with her. After all, her 65th birthday was just around the corner. Soon she would be a grandmother. Her peers' grandchildren were already in school, but she was still waiting for her turn. Her phone on the coffee table rang brightly. It was Ryan. Vera was always happy to hear from her son. "Hello, my darling." "Hello, Mum. I have a favor to ask. Could you make something special for dinner? You're a great cook, so just pick something you do best." "Of course, I'd be happy to. Is there anything specific you'd like?" "No, whatever you think, Mum. And it's not for me. We're having guests tonight." "Guests? Have some colleagues from out of town come to stay? Do you need me to get the spare room ready for them?" "No, Mum. Tonight is a very special occasion. I'm bringing my fiancé." "What?" Vera jumped up from the armchair. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I would have gone all out. This is a huge event." "That's exactly why I didn't tell you. I didn't want you to worry and make a fuss. Just make one of your favorite dishes and I'll buy some wine. That's enough." "No, it's not," Vera objected. "What about napkins to match the cutlery? And candles and decorations? I want to meet your fiancé properly." "Oh, Mum, candles? Are you kidding?" Vera could hear her son smiling. "Just set the table for 3, not 2. Sophie will be embarrassed by all the fuss." "So her name is Sophie," Vera said, realizing that was the only thing she knew about the girl her son loved. "Who is she? How old is she? What does she do? Tell me something." "You'll find out when you meet her," Ryan promised. "It'll give you something to talk about. You'll love her. She's lovely." The few hours before the evening were filled with pleasant chores for Vera. She still went to the shop to buy napkins and candles, and a few more items for the meal. Vera roasted a goose with apples, a dish she excelled at, made mashed potatoes, and prepared a couple of salads. By the agreed time, she had set the table beautifully. Her son would be here soon with Sophie. She was certainly a beautiful and respectable girl, since Ryan had chosen her. She wondered who her parents were, as family was very important. Would she like their flat? Would she find it too simple? Vera's heart pounded with happy anticipation. Ryan had said he was introducing her to his fiancé. This meant they were getting married. What joy! The time when Ryan would give her grandchildren was not far off. Vera couldn't wait to hold her little ones. She believed she would be the perfect grandmother, unlike the one she and her son never had, loving, caring, and attentive. The key turned in the lock. Vera went to the hallway to greet her guests. Her son walked in first, and a young woman stood behind him, thin, pale, and shy. She was holding a simple faux leather bag, and on her feet were worn-out ballet flats from a discount shop. Vera immediately took note of these details. They told her a lot. This was not the daughter-in-law she had dreamed of. "Come in, my dears," she said, managing a smile. She would talk to her son later. First, she needed to find out how serious this relationship was. Sophie sat down modestly next to Ryan. Vera sat opposite her. The girl was pretty, of course, delicate and as timid as a deer. Ryan looked even more masculine and strong next to her. Vera could understand what had attracted her son to this young woman. It turned out Sophie was a couple of years younger than Ryan. After graduating from college, she had become a nurse at a private clinic. Vera thought about it. The profession was noble. But a college? Why not a university? Either she lacked ambition, was lazy, or wasn't smart enough. All were bad options. Sophie and Ryan had been dating for a few years, having met unexpectedly at a bus stop in the rain. In the age of online dating, the story was original and even romantic. It was fate, Ryan declared with exaggerated seriousness, then added more earnestly, Sophie is my guardian angel, the love of my life. The girl smiled shyly. Vera felt a pang of jealousy. Then Sophie told her about her family, a request Vera had made. The girl had come to the city from a village to study. Her parents were poor and had 4 other children besides Sophie. While studying, she lived in a student hall and worked odd jobs because her scholarship wasn't enough to live on. After graduating, she didn't get a first-class degree, Vera had asked, and started working. Life became easier. She could afford to rent a place, buy some clothes and food. Later, she met Ryan and fell in love. Of course you would, Vera thought. He's so handsome and successful. She wants a free ride. She was certain her son was Sophie's only ticket out of poverty, and that his success was the main thing that attracted her. What else would an impoverished village girl want with a man who had a degree, a good job, a flat, and a car? For the first time, Vera felt a hint of distaste towards Sophie, despite the girl's modesty and good manners. She's just pretending to impress me, Vera decided. After the wedding, she'll show her true colors. To avoid upsetting her son, Vera feigned benevolence. Ryan looked so happy and in love. But she would talk to him later. He was too smitten to see anything right now. And Vera understood. She herself had been in a similar position with Victor all those years ago. The charming young taxi driver had also turned her head, and it had taken her years to realize he was using her. She wouldn't let that happen to Ryan. After dinner, Ryan walked Sophie to a taxi. Vera managed a smile as they said goodbye, but she noticed a subtle change in the girl's face, a look of understanding. Sophie knew her true feelings, but no matter, Vera thought. The important thing was that her son hadn't noticed. She would talk to him later, carefully, so as not to hurt him or push him away. He shouldn't marry a poor village girl who didn't even have a university degree. That wasn't the life Vera had dreamed of for her successful, promising son. So, what do you think of Sophie? Ryan asked when he returned. Isn't she lovely? She is, Vera conceded. But is this serious? It couldn't be more serious. I love her more than life itself. She's a miracle, and we're getting married by the end of the year. I've decided. Maybe you shouldn't rush things, Vera said. You can still date and go out. No one is stopping you. But marriage is a very serious step. Mum, what are you talking about? Ryan looked confused. Don't you like Sophie? What is there to like? Vera finally said. She's a poor village girl. She has no education, no prospects. You're her ticket to a comfortable life. I don't want you to be used. So that's what you think? Ryan's voice was filled with disappointment. You think I can only be loved because of my car, my flat, my salary, that I'm nothing on my own? No, I don't think that at all, Vera protested. You're wonderful. You deserve the best, but Sophie isn't right for you. Take your time. You'll find a better wife. Mum, what are you saying? I'm speaking from experience, Vera said. I've never told you this, but there was a time in my life when I was supporting a con man. It was painful and humiliating. Mom, Sophie isn't a con artist, Ryan said calmly. I know people like that. They're called something else. Don't talk about her like that. Vera immediately realized that if she continued, she would lose her son's affection. He was too infatuated with Sophie. And remember, he added, you came from a poor family in a village too. You and Sophie have a lot in common. Not that much, Vera replied. I didn't try to better myself by marrying a rich man. I did it all myself. Fine, I'm sorry, Vera sighed. If you've chosen her, then she must be a good person. You'll like her once you get to know her. You'll see, Mum, Ryan said, finally smiling. Sophie is one of a kind. As it turned out, there was a wedding. Vera tried many times to talk her son out of it, sometimes directly, sometimes with hints, but Ryan was adamant. He loved Sophie and said their relationship had stood the test of time. He also begged his mother to be nice to his fiancé. Vera tried very hard not to show her dislike, but sometimes she just couldn't help it. Why didn't you go to university? The mother-in-law asked Sophie one day. The question had been bothering her. Her friends knew her son was getting married and had been asking about his fiancé. Vera was embarrassed to answer. She wanted to put Sophie in the same awkward position. I had to work, the girl said, shrugging. After I finished college, I had to move out of the student hall. I couldn't study at university and work at the same time. Veera shook her head, thinking to herself that the girl was just lazy. She, Veera, had worked from morning till night and hadn't expected to improve her finances by marrying a rich man. The couple decided not to have a big wedding. They just had a small dinner with a few close friends at a restaurant, then flew off on holiday. This also bothered Veera. She had dreamed of a lavish wedding, the bride in a white gown and veil, her handsome son in an elegant suit, relatives and friends from both sides, cars decorated with ribbons, and a master of ceremonies. But it was not to be. Why should we spend money on a huge party for people, half of whom you and I don't even know? Ryan said honestly when his mother tried to convince him otherwise. It was Sophie's decision, wasn't it? Veera said, pursing her lips. We made the decision together, Ryan said. We decided it was better to spend the money on a holiday. Sun, white sand, warm turquoise water, just the two of us. It's much better, isn't it? So you didn't want your mother there? Veera asked jealously. Mum, a wedding is first and foremost a celebration for the couple, he said. We'll visit you when we get back, and then we'll give you a grandson, or a granddaughter, or maybe both at once if we're lucky. Grandchildren. Veera had been dreaming of them for a long time, but she didn't want Sophie to be their mother. Veera just sighed. Ryan and Sophie got married as planned, enjoyed their honeymoon, and returned to Ryan's flat, which he had finished renovating. She's come into everything new and ready, Veera complained to a friend. That girl is lucky. She must have planned it all, her friend agreed. They're probably playing a trick on you. The couple often visited Veera at first, but then the visits became less frequent until they stopped altogether. Have you forgotten about me? Veera asked her son sadly on the phone. You're always criticizing Sophie, Ryan explained. So we don't come over to avoid getting upset. It's her. She's turning you against your mother, Veera said, hurt. Mum, you're the one being hurtful, Ryan said. But you probably need time to accept the situation. I love Sophie and I love you too. Don't make me choose between the two of you. It's too hard. It was true. Veera was always finding fault with Sophie. She would say her clothes were wrong, that she couldn't talk about art and literature, that she made a loud sound when stirring her tea, or that her laugh was awful. Veera would make these remarks as friendly advice, and Sophie would pretend not to be offended. But she would probably tell her husband everything, painting herself as an innocent victim. She had an advantage after all. She spent all her time with Ryan, while Veera hadn't had a proper one-on-one conversation with her son in ages. Every day, Sophie annoyed Veera more. She's a fake, Veera thought. A country girl from a poor family, but she's sly and worldly wise. It must have been easy for a schemer like her to wrap my good, respectable son around her little finger. Veera knew she was also to blame. She should have talked to her son more about women and warned him to marry a respectable girl from a good family. This was so important. But she thought Ryan was too young, that he had just finished university and started work. She never imagined it would turn out this way. One day, Veera had a sharp pain in her stomach. It was so intense that she couldn't breathe. She called an ambulance. By the time it arrived, the pain had passed. The paramedic told her to get an ultrasound as soon as possible. Veera called her local clinic, but there was a long waiting list. She was advised to go to a private clinic. She found the addresses and numbers of a few places online. One of them had an appointment available that evening, and Veera was delighted to book it. She arrived on time. How different private clinics were from public ones. The staff were friendly, the atmosphere was welcoming, and the interiors were stylish. There were no peeling walls, no scruffy orderlies, no unpleasant smells. Veera was asked to wait for 5 minutes. She sat on a soft leather sofa and picked up a magazine, but then she heard a familiar voice. Right this way, please. Dr. Andrews is ready for you, Sophie was saying to a patient. A white coat suited her. It enhanced her beautiful golden skin tone. What a coincidence. Veera had booked an appointment at the clinic where her daughter-in-law worked. For some reason, Veera didn't want Sophie to see her. She quickly hid her face behind the magazine, but kept a close eye on the pretty young nurse. Sophie exchanged a few words with a colleague at the reception desk, signed some documents, and then a doctor came out of the office. He was a handsome, stately man, and the way he looked at Sophie did not please Veera at all. He couldn't take his eyes off her. His gaze was filled with unconcealed admiration. He was clearly in love with her. He asked Sophie something, and she answered, which made him smile. Was she flirting? Vera found it hard to breathe. She felt so bad for her son. He had married a pauper, and now she was having an affair with a doctor. The doctor came closer to Sophie and said something else. There was no doubt that he was head over heels in love with the little flirt. Another victim of the village girl, Vera thought. She's never going to stop. She's only just married and is already looking for a better option. Sophie then answered briefly and rushed down the corridor. The doctor followed her with his eyes until she disappeared into an office. On the one hand, Vera was shocked by what she had just seen, but on the other, she was relieved. She had been right about Sophie. She was flirting with a doctor at work. What a loyal wife her son had chosen. Vera's ultrasound showed that everything was fine. She was happy about the results, but a different question was now on her mind. How to open her son's eyes? How to save her child from this greedy, unfaithful woman? As a mother, she had to do something and do it now. She called Ryan. He was still at work. "How are you?" she asked, deciding to start from afar. "How's married life?" "Everything's great," he said. "Are you sure?" Vera asked. "That's a strange question." "Of course I am. Why?" "I went to the clinic where Sophie works today for an ultrasound." "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine. But that's not the point. You should have seen how one of the doctors was staring at her. He was devouring her with his eyes." "So what?" Ryan said. "My wife is a real beauty. It's normal for men to look at her. I find it rather flattering." "Well, if I were you, I wouldn't be so happy," Vera said, no longer trying to choose her words. Sophie was openly flirting with him, smiling at him. She can't be trusted. "Mom," Ryan's voice was firm. "You're at it again. Sophie is the one person I can trust. Our relationship has stood the test of time." "And what about me?" Vera was taken aback. "Don't you trust me?" "I'm not so sure about that lately," Ryan admitted. "You're too eager to destroy my happiness." There it was again. That wretched Sophie was coming between her and her son. Vera's insides churned with a mix of anger and frustration. But there was nothing she could do. Life would take care of it. From that day on, she saw Sophie not only as a gold digger and a lazy girl, but also as an unfaithful wife. How could she think otherwise? She had seen her daughter-in-law flirting with the doctor at work. Ryan would find out the truth eventually, and realize his mother was right. Her son was in for a lot of pain and disappointment. Vera decided to celebrate her 65th birthday in a grand fashion. The wedding had been so modest, and she craved a grand celebration. She booked a large room at a restaurant, paid for a lavish dinner, and invited dozens of her former colleagues and friends. Of course, she invited her son and his wife, even though she didn't want to see Sophie at all. But if she didn't invite her, Ryan wouldn't come, and her guests would ask too many questions. The party was a great success. The master of ceremonies entertained the guests with amusing games and jokes. Waiters brought out delicious dishes on time. Vera looked at her daughter-in-law, who must never have been to such a party before. Let her see how normal people celebrate, she thought. Sophie was quiet and very modest, and Vera was happy about it. She looked a little flustered, which was to be expected from a clumsy country girl in polite society. The time came for the toasts. The guests stood up one by one and said kind words about Vera, praising her career achievements, her ability to make friends, and her strong character. Vera melted with pleasure. It was so nice to know that her loved ones appreciated her. Then it was her son's turn. He stood up with Sophie. Vera looked at him and smiled fondly. He was so handsome, like a Hollywood actor. The lavender-colored jacket and shirt suited him so well. Ryan said some touching words about his love for his mother and how much she had done for him. He put a small envelope on the tray offered to him by the master of ceremonies, a gift for his mother. Then he said something that made all the guests, including Vera, gasp in surprise. "The most important gift of all will be arriving in March when you come to the hospital to see your new grandchild." For a few seconds, his words hung in the air. Then a collective sigh filled the room, followed by applause. People smiled and offered congratulations. Someone even shed a tear. Sophie lowered her eyes in embarrassment. Ryan put an encouraging arm around her shoulders. Only Vera sat with a stony face. Unpleasant thoughts swirled in her mind. March. So Sophie is about halfway through her pregnancy. That's why she's been wearing loose blouses to hide her bump. And Ryan didn't tell me. He's telling me now, in front of all these people. Instead of feeling happy about the grandchild she had longed for, Vera felt a sense of disappointment. It was painful. It was as if her son had cut her out of his life, making her a secondary character. And all because of a flirtatious village girl who was pregnant and still flirting with a doctor at work. Vera later regretted what she did, telling herself it was the shock and the alcohol. She should have shared her suspicions with her son in private. But it was too late. When things had quieted down, Vera stood up and asked, "Ryan, are you sure the baby is yours?" At that moment, the scene from the clinic flashed before Vera's eyes, the doctor looking at her daughter-in-law with an adoring gaze, Sophie smiling charmingly in return. There were clearly sparks between them. What else could Vera have thought? The master of ceremonies tried to make a joke of it, and the guests laughed. But Ryan's face had turned to stone. His eyes were filled with pain and disappointment. He went pale. Sophie flushed bright red, then turned and walked out of the room without looking back. Ryan gave his mother a look of disgust and hurried after his wife. Vera knew then that her son was truly angry with her. She realized she had been wrong to ask such a question. The guests didn't need to know what was going on in her family. And now, all these people knew his wife was unfaithful. She had humiliated her son. The guests pretended that nothing had happened, laughing, singing, and participating in the games. Everyone preferred to ignore the awkward moment and not ruin the party. Only one of Vera's friends comforted her. Her son had recently divorced, and his wife had taken half his property and now wouldn't even let her see her grandchildren. "I wish I had been as brave and outspoken as you," her friend said, hugging Vera. "My son is so upset with me. How can I make it up to him? What you said was so terrible." "He's my son," Vera said. "He'll understand and forgive his mother." But Ryan didn't seem to be in a hurry to forgive her. She called him many times, but he would decline her calls, and then he seemed to block her number. For some reason, she didn't dare go to his flat, even though she had the keys. 2 months passed. Vera was miserable. She missed her son, his voice, his eyes. She missed their conversations and walks together. She regretted what had happened on her birthday. Why had she aired her dirty laundry in public? But she hadn't changed her opinion of Sophie. In fact, she was even more certain that the baby wasn't Ryan's. Sophie was afraid of being exposed, so she was keeping Vera and her son apart. Vera would have told him everything she had seen. He would have known her suspicions weren't baseless and would have had his own doubts. But Ryan had built an invisible wall around his small family and was keeping his mother, the person he loved most in the world, out. Vera had never felt so lonely. It was crushing. She felt abandoned, useless. She felt that if something happened to her, no one would even notice. Then one day, Ryan came to see her. He didn't call or warn her. He just opened the door with his key and walked in as if nothing had happened. Vera was doing her needlework in front of the TV. The picture she was working on was turning out beautifully, but she would have preferred to be sewing patterns on a baby blanket, getting ready for her grandchild, if only she was sure the child was her son's. Ryan's unexpected visit made her happy and excited. She jumped up and her embroidery fell to the floor. Her son looked calm and determined. So grown up, a real man. She had missed him so much. "Ryan, you came!" she exclaimed, trying to hug him. But he dodged her embrace. "Sophie's at work," he said. "Mum, we need to talk. It's serious." "I regret what happened on my birthday," she said. "I really do. Maybe you should come with me now and apologize to Sophie." "Apologize to Sophie?" Vera blinked in surprise. "I'm not the one who needs to apologize. I wanted to tell you the truth about your wife. You know, I saw her." "So you still don't get it?" Ryan interrupted, looking at her with a bitter expression. "You didn't see anything. I did. You called my wife a con artist. What was that about?" "What? What con artist?" "Okay, it's my fault," he said. "I should have told you everything the moment you met Sophie. But she stopped me. She didn't want to worry you for no reason. She didn't want to look like a savior. She just wanted a normal relationship with you. But since it's come to this, you're a victim of a very old trick." "What are you talking about? What is it you didn't tell me?" "Why don't you make some tea?" Ryan said, settling down on the sofa. "This will be a very long conversation. There's a lot you need to know." Ryan began with the moment a new student, a guy named Jack, joined his group in the 4th year. He wasn't a very good student. In fact, he'd barely managed to be readmitted after being expelled. His parents had pulled some strings. He was a couple of years older than his classmates. Jack immediately appealed to Ryan with his free-spirited attitude. He would eat crisps in class and ignore the lecturer. He would argue with the tutors, answer his phone during lectures, and sometimes just get up and leave in the middle of a lesson. And of course, he'd often skip for weeks at a time, only to reappear, looking thin and unkempt. Jack wasn't keen on socializing with his classmates, acting as if they were too young and inexperienced for a worldly guy like him. It seemed as though he had a very interesting and eventful life. He was always getting calls. From bits and pieces of his conversations, it was clear that he went to parties and clubs and traveled a lot. Ryan was a little jealous of him. Jack walked with a certain swagger, carefree and uninhibited. Ryan, on the other hand, had always strictly followed the rules his mother had set for him. She had taught him that this was how well-bred, decent people behaved. And Ryan had tried, but now, looking at Jack, he realized there was another way to live. What did Ryan have? University, home, a part-time job, and the occasional trip to the cinema or bowling alley with his classmates. Sometimes he would go on dates with shy girls who, after a while, started acting like unapproachable princesses. Girls from good families were all the same. He read a lot of books, and that was it. This was all that made up Ryan's boring life. Jack, on the other hand, seemed to live a richer, more exciting life. A real life, not one that was dictated to him. Ryan had seen his share of rule breakers at school and university, but they were just clowns seeking attention. Jack was different. He didn't seem to care what people thought. Compared to his exciting life, university seemed grey and insignificant. At 21, Ryan suddenly felt like a teenager. He felt that it was time to change something. He no longer wanted to live by rules dictated to him. He was tired of being a good student. His youth was slipping away, and nothing truly exciting was happening to him. After university, it would be work, marriage, and then children. This was the life his mother had planned for him, and it left no room for fun, parties, or adventure. Jack soon became Ryan's role model. He started to copy the way Jack talked and his gestures, sometimes without even realizing it. One day, Ryan was so bold that he openly swore at a tutor who had criticized him. His classmates gasped in surprise. No one expected such behavior from the best student in the class. They were, in fact, a very good group, the strongest in the year. Jack turned around and looked at Ryan with a hint of interest. He even gave him a knowing wink. At the break, Jack came up to him. "You're not so bad after all," he said, drawing out the words. "Not like the rest of them. They just take it and stay silent." "I'm not one of them," Ryan said, happy at the praise from his idol. "You must be fun to hang out with." Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "Come to the West End nightclub tonight with me and my friends. We're there all the time." Ryan went to the club that night. He wanted a taste of the fun life his new classmate lived. Jack was his guide to this beautiful new world. That same evening, his old friends asked him to go to the cinema to see the new Marvel film. "Maybe we'll meet some girls there," one of them, a chubby guy named Ben, said dreamily. But Ryan knew there was nothing for him in that company. With Jack, it was a completely different story. Given the choice between the cinema and the nightclub, Ryan didn't hesitate. He hadn't been to places like this often, and to be honest, he didn't like them. They were dark, stuffy, and smoky, with loud music, and the dance floor was packed. Ryan wasn't a big fan of dancing either. He had gone to clubs with his friends a few times to meet girls, but the girls had preferred other guys like Jack and his friends, who were easygoing, confident, bold, and decisive. Tonight, Ryan felt just like them. Jack and his crowd welcomed him as one of their own. They had a few drinks, then hit the dance floor. Soon, beautiful girls joined them. Being with Jack, Ryan felt like a real man. He didn't even have to think about what to say to the girls, even though talking to women had always been difficult for him. The words just flowed. The girls listened attentively, admired him, and opened up to him. It was a wonderful feeling. Towards dawn, Ryan felt exhausted. Jack and his friends also looked tired, but then one of the guys pulled a small baggie out of his pocket. "This will give you energy," he said to a surprised Ryan. The others didn't need an explanation. They had clearly done this before. "Don't worry," Jack reassured him. "It's all natural, no chemicals, just a little boost. The night is just getting started and we're already out of steam. That's a shame." The guys chewed on some dried herbs. Ryan followed their lead. He knew what he was doing and was a little worried, but he couldn't back out now. It would be rude. He had been offered it freely. A short time later, Ryan felt a surge of energy. He felt like a superhero, handsome, confident, and capable of anything. He felt that everything was possible. Then he blacked out. He woke up in a garage on an air mattress. Next to him, covered with a blanket, was a beautiful girl who had clearly had too much to drink. A few other guys and girls were sleeping there too, including Jack, some on an old sofa, some on mattresses, some on the floor. How had they gotten here? He didn't remember anything. His head was pounding, everything was spinning, and he felt nauseous. Last night had been great, very fun. Now it was time to pay for it. But Ryan was ready to pay the price for the unforgettable night. "You're awake," Jack said groggily, turning over. "Good. You went down hard last night. We almost called an ambulance, but you're a trooper. You pulled through." From then on, Ryan started hanging out with Jack and his friends. It was a completely new feeling. Ryan felt much more confident and behaved more freely. Many things that had once seemed important lost all meaning, such as his dream of a first-class degree and a master's. He used to be shy around girls, not knowing what to say or how to act. Now, in Jack's company, he could easily meet girls, usually for a night or two. He was following the example of his new friends, and the alcohol probably played a role too, as did other things. One of the guys always had something interesting on him. It made the world seem brighter, his feelings more intense, his emotions more alive. Ryan now barely talked to his old friends. What did they know about real fun? These losers were only worried about their upcoming exams, but Ryan had caught Jack's easygoing attitude. He wasn't worried about university at all. He had other more interesting plans. Jack was planning a big party at his parents' country house, and Ryan was invited. He couldn't wait. The party promised to be amazing. The only thing that got in the way was his mother, with her constant lectures. Before, he hadn't noticed how suffocating and unpleasant she was. Her constant nagging annoyed him so much that sometimes he felt like hitting her to shut her up. One day, he almost did. He raised his hand. Her eyes flashed with fear, then surprise. Ryan's whole body was aching, and his head was pounding. He had had a great time with his friends the night before. One of them had brought something new. The effect had been amazing, but this morning, he felt like a wreck. And then his mother started with her endless advice. He almost lost it. Money was another problem. Ryan used to make his own money by building websites, and his mother would give him some extra cash now and then. He never felt a shortage of money, though he wasn't a rich kid either. But now he had no time, energy, or desire to work. And his mother had cut him off. She gave him just enough for his bus fare. He couldn't have much fun on that. But Ryan needed money. Fun wasn't cheap. One day, he found a way out of his predicament. He had known since he was a child that his mother hid her jewelry box on the top shelf of the linen cupboard. It was full of bracelets, chains, earrings, pendants, and even watches. She loved jewelry. Without a shred of guilt, Ryan reached into the treasure box. Soon, the pawnbroker knew him by sight. Surprisingly, Ryan didn't feel guilty about what he was doing. The main thing was to get money so he could continue living his carefree life. It seemed his mind was starting to rot, but at the time he didn't realize it and felt no regret. He failed his exams, of course. To be precise, he didn't even show up for a single one, just like Jack. When his mother found out, she started another row, which made Ryan completely lose it. He raised his hand at her again and would probably have hit her if she hadn't dodged him. Vera went pale, covered her face with her hands, and started crying. It was the first time Ryan had seen his mother cry, but even that didn't make him come to his senses. He waited for her to go to the shop and slipped into her room. The jewelry box was still there. He could get to the pawnbroker before it closed. He needed money for the evening. He needed to have fun and de-stress. Everything was starting to get on his nerves. But a surprise was waiting for him. His mother had discovered the missing jewelry and hidden the box. Ryan turned the flat upside down, throwing books off shelves and emptying drawers and dressers. He even checked the kitchen cupboards, but the box was nowhere to be found. In a fit of rage, he broke a few plates and ran out of the flat, which was starting to feel like a prison. Ryan went to Jack's garage. Jack was there, recovering from a party he had been to the night before. He didn't look so great. Ryan suspected he looked even worse. He told his friend about his problems. No money, nowhere to live, and his mother was driving him crazy. "What's the problem?" Jack asked. "Just live here. This is my pad. My parents haven't looked in here for ages. You can stay as long as you want. As for money, I have an idea." The idea was to break into a local corner shop. It closed at 7, and an old man was the guard. Jack would distract him while Ryan would quickly clean out the stockroom. Boxes of cereal, sausages, cans, and drinks all went into a huge bag that his sharp friend had provided. Then they took it all to some guy who gave them a few quid for it. Ryan realized Jack had done this before. But it didn't matter. They had money for the night. The night was already here. Ryan lived in the garage for about a week. He drank a lot and felt terrible. He didn't like his new life, but he couldn't go back to his old one. At some point, he lost all sense of reality. Then he found himself at a bus stop on the edge of town. How had he gotten there? With no money in his pocket. Why was he shaking so badly? And why was it so hard to breathe? And what was he going to do now? He didn't even have the energy to think, so he just lay down on the bench and decided to let fate take its course. He was ready for the worst, even for his own end. Surprisingly, the thought didn't scare him. It was cold, it was raining, and a piercing wind was blowing. People were all at home. There was no one to save him. Who would even help a dirty, disheveled guy who looked like a tramp? He knew he looked awful. People would just assume he was drunk and passed out and walk on by. At least, that's what Ryan would have done. And then a miracle happened. He couldn't explain it any other way. A beautiful, young face with worried eyes leaned over him. A concerned voice asked if he was okay. The girl looked so pure, so good, especially compared to the women Jack had been spending time with. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Should I call an ambulance?" Ryan mumbled something unintelligible. The girl took her phone out of her pocket and called for an ambulance. While waiting, she felt his pulse. Her face showed fear. Ryan concluded he was in a bad way. The world was fading away, but the face of this beautiful angel kept him from slipping away completely. Despite the pain, nausea, and dizziness, he wanted to look at her kind eyes. The ambulance arrived quickly. He was put in the back, and to his great joy, the girl got in with him. It seemed there was still a reason to be happy, even in this state. The paramedics saved him. The doctor who came in for his rounds looked at Ryan sternly. "You should pray to that girl for the rest of your life," he said. "She saved your life? Another couple of minutes and it would have been over?" Ryan nodded. It was still hard for him to speak. "Who should we contact?" the doctor asked. Ryan shook his head. He couldn't let his mother know about this. She wouldn't be able to handle it. He would break her heart. He would rather die than put her through that. "It's your choice," the doctor said. "You're an adult, but one more time, and you probably won't be so lucky. You need to get better, and you need to do it now. Think about it while you're here." Ryan thought about it and decided he could handle it himself. He would just be more careful with how much he consumed. He saw people using substances every day, but if you were careful, nothing bad would happen. He wanted to get out of the hospital as soon as possible to see Jack and the others. He missed the fun, the laughter, the carefree lifestyle. The hospital walls were stifling and the procedures were exhausting. None of his new friends visited him. Ryan had called Jack as soon as he could and told him where he was. Jack was sympathetic on the phone and told him that things like this happened. He asked him not to give anyone his name or the names of the other guys. Sophie, the girl from the bus stop, came to see him a few times. It turned out she was a nurse, which was why she was able to assess his condition so quickly and call for help. She hadn't just walked by. The first time she visited, she wanted to see how he was doing. She was afraid he hadn't made it. When she saw he was okay, she breathed a sigh of relief. That day, they talked a lot, and Ryan somehow ended up telling her everything that had happened to him. She listened attentively without interrupting. While he was telling his story, Ryan realized how terrible his life had become. He was ashamed of himself. He had been kicked out of university, ruined his relationship with his mother, stolen her jewelry, and was hanging out with a bad crowd. He thought Sophie would get up and leave, that decent people would stay away from guys like him. But she stayed long after visiting hours ended. They talked about other things. It was so easy and pleasant to be with her. Ryan told her about his travels and admired her beautiful face, her slender figure, and her charming smile. Sophie came to visit a few more times. She must have enjoyed his company too. One day, she told him about her life. She had come to the city from a village. She was from a very poor, large family. She had always been a good student and had two dreams: to escape poverty and to help people. She had achieved both. She had graduated from college and was now a nurse helping people every day. And her salary allowed her to not feel poor. Sophie was proud that she was financially independent and didn't rely on anyone. Compared to Sophie's story, Ryan's looked even more pathetic. The girl had achieved her goals without any support, against all odds. She had gotten an education, found a good job, and learned to cope with everything on her own. And he, whose mother had always supported him, couldn't even finish university. Talking to Sophie made Ryan think about his life. In the hospital, he changed his views. Partying with Jack's friends no longer seemed so attractive. Sophie, on the other hand, drew him in like a magnet. Every time it was time to leave, he didn't want to let her go. Seeing her deep blue eyes, hearing her voice, feeling her touch, it was a true joy. The most beautiful part was that she felt the same way. Ryan could see it. She wanted to stay with him longer too. He didn't understand what such a pure, beautiful, and kind girl saw in a guy like him. The first time she saw him, he was pitiful, curled up and shaking and throwing up. He could only have inspired disgust. She had felt sorry for him, then shown concern, coming to the hospital to check on him. And she must have seen something in him that she could love. Ryan had long felt disgusted with himself, but now this. After being discharged from the hospital, Ryan went home. His mother never found out that he had spent a whole week in the hospital. She thought he had just been wandering around as he often did. He and Sophie continued to see each other and talk on the phone. Being with her gave him a lift and made him feel better and cleaner. Ryan knew that an attractive girl would draw men's attention. He saw the looks on strangers' faces during their walks. The head doctor at the clinic where Sophie worked, Dr. Andrews, had even asked her out. Ryan had seen the doctor when he went to pick her up from work and realized that he was in love with her. He was a successful young man with good looks and a toned body. But Sophie chose him, Ryan, the loser who had been kicked out of university. He could only call it a miracle. Soon after his discharge, Jack reappeared, offering to go out to the club to celebrate his recovery. Ryan agreed. He had been trying to start a new life, but he was still drawn to his old habits. He wanted to get lost in the haze and forget about all his problems. In the middle of the fun, his phone rang. It was Sophie. She must have sensed he was in danger. She heard the noise and knew where he was. She told him to leave immediately and come to her. Ryan hesitated. He was having so much fun. It was about to get even better. Nothing bad was going to happen. Either you come to me now, or we're never seeing each other again, Sophie said firmly. There was no doubt she was serious. She had never given him an ultimatum, never put pressure on him. But now she was making him choose. Ryan looked around. There was a dancing crowd, loud music, and cigarette smoke. Then he thought of Sophie, her eyes, her gentle voice. He thought of Dr. Andrews looking at her sadly as she walked out of work, not noticing him, and taking Ryan's arm as he stood waiting for her. He blinked, and the image changed. Now he was lying on a bench, ready to die, and her beautiful, concerned face was looking down at him. Ryan called a taxi and went to Sophie's. It wasn't a difficult choice. She hugged him tightly. I was afraid it was too late, she said, that I had lost you again. I'll never see them again, Ryan said, stroking her shiny brown hair. I don't need anyone but you in my life. And Ryan kept his promise. He flatly refused all offers from Jack and his friends to go out. Soon they left him alone. Ryan set about rebuilding his life. He returned to university and threw himself into his studies. He started making websites again. He worked hard to become independent and proposed to his love. His mother was overjoyed to see her son get his act together. She thought he had realized his mistakes and made the right choice on his own. He and Sophie decided not to tell her what had really happened. It was too terrible a story. He also decided not to introduce Sophie to his mother until they were engaged. He felt it was the right thing to do. 2 years later, Ryan had saved up enough to start a family and proposed to Sophie. It wasn't a surprise to her, but she was still very happy. The meeting with Ryan's mother was a disaster. They immediately knew she didn't like her future daughter-in-law. Vera tried to hide it, but it wasn't very convincing. Ryan thought things would get better after the wedding, but they only got worse. Sophie pretended that everything was fine and that her mother-in-law's behavior didn't bother her, but Ryan saw how much it hurt her. He didn't understand how anyone could dislike Sophie. She was perfect, beautiful, kind, loyal, and brave. It was a miracle to meet such a unique person. Ryan hoped the news of a grandchild would change his mother's opinion of Sophie, so he waited to tell her until his birthday party. Sophie had her doubts about announcing the news in front of everyone, but Ryan told her it would have a greater impact. Of course, he didn't expect to hear such hurtful words from his mother. In front of all their guests, she questioned whether the baby was his. Ryan looked at Sophie in horror. She looked as if someone had thrown a bucket of cold water over her. His wife turned and walked out. He ran after her. Sophie needed him now more than ever. That evening, Ryan spent a long time comforting his wife and calling himself a fool. Sophie had been right. It was a bad idea to announce her pregnancy in front of everyone. He had wanted to give his mother the most beautiful surprise, the greatest gift for her birthday, and instead, it had turned into an ugly scene. From then on, they stopped talking to Vera. Ryan was